It is such a privilege to be here. It's really hard to express it. I want to thank David A. I want to thank Bob H., the rest of the committee for inviting me. Everything has just been beyond belief. The fellowship is fantastic. The hospitality rooms are the best. And I had the privilege to go to the harbor meeting at noon today. Jim G. took me, and that's wonderful to be able to go someplace and to attend a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love the Harbor Club. And I found out a little bit of the history, and that was very, very meaningful to me. I never realized that I had so many friends in Texas. There's a lot of people here that I am so very, very grateful to see again. I also want to thank the committee for the fruit basket. If you're new, do stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's simple. Peggy got my fruit basket, I got Nell's. Nell didn't get one, and I've already eaten 3/4 of hers, so I couldn't give it back to her. We don't know where Nell's is. Curtis may have it, but, Cease may have Curtis's. I don't know. But I was told to keep it simple and not complicate it up. And so, thanks, Nell, for sharing your bananas and your grapefruit and everything. I really did appreciate it. When I hear that serenity prayer, it takes me back. I love that prayer. And I probably use it an awful lot every single day. It reminds me of something that's very, very important to me. It reminds me that the woman I was will drink again. It reminds me that I am the problem. It never was where I grew up, how I grew up, who I married, who I didn't marry, how many kids I had or didn't have. That the problem is right here. And that I have to change me. And this changing is a day-at-a-time thing. The longer that I trudge on the road of sobriety with you people, the more I find that I really have to work on. I was told when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous that attitude is gratitude, and I better watch my attitude. And I better watch my attitude about people, places, and things. And that there was good in everything, there was good in everybody, and that if I tried to do the best that I could, every day I'd get an edge on the day because I would never have a gray day. There would be things that would come into my life that I wouldn't like very much, but they said you'll learn to meet life on life's terms, and you'll realize that it isn't all roses, but it's how you face what's going on in your life, and we have 12 beautiful steps to help you do that. And trudging on that road of sobriety with you and listening to you and staying in these meeting rooms, I have tried to do the best that I can with changing me and changing my attitude. To accept the things that I can't change is sometimes real hard to do. And it isn't that I have never been judgmental, and it never is, and yes, I've looked for the icky maybe, but it makes me feel uncomfortable. Real uncomfortable. So I really have to swing around and take a good look at this, because I don't want to be uncomfortable anymore. My mother once told me something when I was little. She said, you're going to find out that the world is a looking glass, and what you see in it is a reflection of yourself. And I try to remember that. And, you know, and the wisdom to know the difference, my sponsors told me, will come with time and a lot of mistakes. And that I am a human being, and nobody in AA, and they said, is sprouting wings and has a little halo. You strive for perfection, and I think that was one of the greatest things that I ever heard in my life. I could give myself the right to be wrong and the right to be right. I could give the other person the right to be wrong and the right to be right. And I loved it. When I had 5 years in AA, they came to me and they said, now you can say a short version of the Serenity Prayer. It won't take you so long. You know, let go and let God and live and let live. Then when I had 10 years, my sponsor said to me, now you can say the shortest version of it all. The hell with it. And I do say that on occasion in here. But all you promised me was that if I stayed in these meetings, nobody ever told me to keep coming back. You just said stay here. You didn't want me to get the edge on anything, I guess. Stay in these meeting rooms and it will get better. And I couldn't figure out for a while what that was. And now I know, I think, what it is. It's in here. It's being comfortable with me. It's going to bed without any guilt. It's waking up in the morning and not being scared to death that it's another day. Being frightened to get out of that bed because I always knew what was going to happen, and sometimes I didn't want it to happen. And now I don't have to be concerned about that anymore. And that's just what some of the things that you have taught to me. And I do not want to get back on the tilt-a-whirl of life. I hated it there. And I didn't understand why I was there, and I didn't know what to do about it. And I really don't like to talk about drinking, but it says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that we have to share a little bit about, what was like and what happened and what it's like now. I grew up with alcoholism. My first father was murdered before I was born. My mother was 3 months pregnant with me as a direct result of alcohol. And I felt different. I didn't have a father, and kids can be cruel. And I sort of started to go inside of myself. I acted sometimes like I liked you, like you were a friend. But I never really felt that way because I always wanted to feel like you looked. And I never thought I could. I never quite felt like you looked. You looked like you were happy when you were little, and you looked like you were having fun. And I had feelings of being different and kind of standing on the outside right from the beginning. And when my mother did remarry, she married one of the finest men I have ever known in my life. And I've always thought of him as my dad. And he did not drink, and he was a most wonderful man. And when my mother started to drink and pass out and do all those things that alcohol creates, I didn't go to my father. I never expressed my feelings to anybody. We just didn't talk about it. If it didn't happen, it was one of those jobs. And I kind of kept everything in. I sort of stuffed it all. I had 3 aunts that died of alcoholism, my mother's 3 sisters. I had a grandfather who died of cirrhosis of the liver, and it was there. However, I chose to stuff up. I chose to play act. I chose to be the way that I was. And so I went through life with kind of like a chip on my shoulder. I got married to somebody who lived the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous without even being in Alcoholics Anonymous. We always find one of those, don't we? Wonderful man. Not a selfish bone in his body, very outgoing, very loving. And I wasn't happy. I didn't know how to be happy. Today I know I can be as happy as I want to be. But back then, I chose not to be happy. I mean, I felt better if I lived under that little cloud of doom and gloom. You know, no matter what happened, it always wasn't good enough. And when my first daughter was born, I felt the way other people looked when they had kids. And I was very selfish, I was very self-centered, and I didn't like any of the attention going to her. And I felt kind of lost and kind of alone, and I had allowed myself to be this way. And so when we were at a party, and somebody said to me, "Why don't you learn to relax? Why don't you learn how to smile? Why don't you have a drink?" And my arm shot out. And I picked up that drink, and let me tell you something. And I heard it from those wonderful, wonderful old-timers last night. The message, I never felt as grateful as when I walked out of this room last night with the way they shared. And Peggy today, dear, dear Peggy, who I have come to know so well over this weekend. She said the same thing this morning. It made you feel wonderful. God, my mouth went like this. My brain couldn't keep up with what was coming out of here. Finally, I think it gave up. And I walked into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, and my God, I looked like Elizabeth Taylor. You know, I didn't have this funny looking ear anymore. I always blame my drinking on this ear. It's kind of strange, but that's all right. Today I don't care. It's kind of a cute thing. I'm waiting for it to beep out to outer space. You know, it's sort of, you accept the things you can't change. And I looked like Elizabeth Taylor. And I liked it. I liked what alcohol did for me. And it did it for me for about 3 weeks. And then it started to remove. There's some of you sitting out there that are as old as I am. I know that. And I'm not telling you how old I am either. I just will tell you this. 3/4 of it is dropped around my knees. So my mother says, wait till it drops around your ankles, and you really will have a problem. Anyway, there was a thing we used to use, it was called an art gum eraser. And if you write in pencil on a page and you take that art gum eraser, it fades what you've written from the page. And that's exactly what alcohol did in my life. It started to remove. And it did it so slowly that I didn't even know what was happening. I do know that after 5 years, my husband came to me and said, "You have a drinking problem, and you better do something about it or I'll cut off your allowance." My God, he'd already taken me off the checking account and the savings account. I just forged a couple of checks, you know, and I'd had drawn a few funds out of the bank that we didn't have. And I figured, well, he was so darn stingy and such a rotten Scotchman. He wasn't parting with his money, so I just take it. I was also selling things out of the house. I had a pawnbroker down in Cleveland. And he left, you know. When I came into AA, I think maybe he went broke. My husband started to write down the things we had in the house. You know how that goes? And I was going to frequenting, we have liquor stores. We had them. And you had to go in a liquor store, and you had to sign the kind you wanted and sign your name. And I was going in there and signing Emma Glutz and Tizzy Lish and Jane Doe and all these false names because I was afraid if I always sign my own name, the FBI would come looking for me. Now, I don't know what the FBI wanted with somebody from Brecksville, Ohio, but so I switched. I found something. I found rocket juice. It's called wine. Boy, it gets you where you want to go quick. I was up on the moon waving down with the American flag in my hand years ago, before the government spent millions getting us up there. I could have saved them all that money, but of course they didn't call on me. I liked wine. It comes in very convenient sizes, the large economy size, that you can pour into different little things. It comes in quarts, it comes in pints, and it's great. Pints are great. You can stick them down your pantyhose and you can walk into the house without having a lump, or walking funny. The other ones, I had no trouble with step 2. I never could read what I wrote when I was drinking. I don't know about you. I used to make out maps the night before when I'd hide the wine, you know, and in the morning I never could read the map. It was very frustrating. And so I figured if I painted the wine bottles white and hung them out of the second-story window on a white rope, then when I was attempting to hoover or make the beds, if I needed to have a drink so I could make it from the left side of the bed over to the right, I could hook up the rope and take a little slug and let it back down. And anyway, we have a white house, and I went outside and I looked and I couldn't see those bottles hanging out there. So painted them green, tied them to the fir trees, too. You know, drinking is very time-consuming. I remember my husband calling me out of the house one day. And I went outside, and he said, "What in God's name is that?" I said, "What?" "That thing hanging out of the window." I said, "I don't see anything." He said, "You stand right there. I'm going down the street to get Marty." Now, Marty was his best friend. And he said, "You stand here. Don't you move." And I said, "I won't." "No, we are. I won't." And the minute he got down the street, beyond sight, I beat every darn Olympic record. I went up those stairs. I got those things in. I stuffed them under the beds. I ran back downstairs, and I was standing in the front yard, not even breathing hard, when he and Marty came back. And he said, "Marty, look, she's going insane. Do you see what she's doing?" And Marty said, "Bruce, are you all right? There's nothing wrong." Too bad they didn't have Al-Anon then. Anyway, you know how it gets. You put it in the enema bottle, you know, and hide it in the douche bag. And I was always constipated. I was always going in the bathroom, you know, and then you could hang up the little enema thing. Little white gloved suburban housewife sherry sipper. By God. Anyway, there were a few of those things. And he got very angry. And so in order to keep the money coming in, I went around AA, the first of 3 times. And if you're new, for God's sake, listen. Because we joke, we have fun, we laugh. But this is a life and death business. I walked into that meeting, and I was not honest with myself. I didn't keep an open mind. I heard what you said. You lost your jobs, you lost your families, you got DWIs, you spent time in jail. That hadn't happened to me yet. That's a very important word. If it hasn't happened to you yet, I guarantee you, if you go out there and you start on that total whirl all over again, it will happen. And I wasn't willing. I wasn't willing to do the simple little ditties asked of me. I was terrified on the inside. How am I ever going to get along without it? And I wouldn't give it a chance. 2 years later, the social services were called to the house. I had had a couple more children by this time. And one little girl, Kimberly, when she was a little over a year old, she had had the measles. And Annie came out in the kitchen, my oldest one, who at that time was about 18 months older than Kimmy, came out in the kitchen and pulled on my skirt and said, "Mommy, something is the matter with Kimmy." I was standing in the kitchen diluting my wine in ginger ale. And I told her just to wait a minute. I'd get in there when I could. I was too busy. The selfishness of this disease. And she said, "Mommy, she's on the floor and she's acting funny." And I literally pushed that child away. And I told her to stop lying to me, that I'd be there when I was through doing what I was doing. And when I walked into the living room, the neurosurgeons at University Hospital figured that Kimberly was probably going into a fourth convulsion. She retrogressed back to a 3-week-old baby. We had to put her in a private home because of the damage that was done, and she ultimately died when she was 8 by the grace of God. That took a lot of forgiveness of self when I came to you people. But this is just one of those times when alcohol was there and the choice was mine, and alcohol had by this time started to suck me down into that hideous quagmire. The social services came over, and they said there was a lot of screaming in our house, and that my children that were going to school were not properly dressed, and that the neighbors had reported a lot of yelling, a lot of crying, and they wanted to know what a few bruises were on my children, and of course I had terrified them to the point that they lied. My husband was a sales engineer, and he had a lot of territory, and he couldn't stay home and bird dog. And the neighbors couldn't come over because I kept the house locked and I kept the blinds shut. And I didn't understand why I was doing this. I went back around AA, played the same game. Not honest, not an open mind. I wasn't willing. I went to one meeting a week. My gosh, I've never seen a kid pass from one grade to the next that goes once a week to school. I don't think it can be done, and I sure as heck don't think it can be done here. This is our classroom. This is where we come and learn one more thing that might save our lives down the road. So I went around and I played the game. And 4 years later, a judge looked at me over a thing like this, and he said, 90 days in the workhouse or Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd had 9 DWIs. I'd been in jail 9 times. And when Jim G. told me today that he used to be a sheriff, I sat there in his car on the way to the meeting kind of sizing up his head. Because I had been picked up on a very bad charge. I was up on assault and battery because the sheriff of Summit County had picked me up for drunken driving and asked to take me home. And I got furious What would the neighbors think? The neighbors, God, they'd probably be going, yay, finally. So I did what any little white glove sherry sipper would do. I picked up my wine bottle that was in the front seat of the car and I let him have it right over the head. He ended up with 24 stitches. I ended up with mug shots and had a horrible charge and was, handcuffed and all that kind of stuff that I never thought would happen to me. I didn't want to go to the workhouse. I didn't like the stripes on the uniforms. They used to wear them that way. They went around instead of up and down, and you wore little hats. And I didn't want to do that. So I said, I will go to AA. And I went around it, and I played the same game, and the next 4 years were hell. That awful loneliness that we know. We can be in a room like this and we can be so alone. I used to stand at the second-story window and I'd look out and I'd see the other women and their hair would be shining and they'd be smiling. I could hear them laughing. And they were standing there with their kids waiting for the school bus, and my kids were standing over there. Nobody wants their children to play with the children of a drunk after a while. And my God, I didn't understand why I couldn't be like them. And the pain was so intense, I did the only thing that I knew what to do. I drank. And the pain went away. And afraid, frightened all the time of everything. And you walk out to get the bills so you can tear them up before your husband sees them. And somebody would pass by from the neighborhood, and I'd wave. And they wouldn't wave back. Nobody was talking to me at home. Most horrible thing is you fall down somewhere in a blackout and you wake up and you see those little eyes looking at you. Is the most horrible, God-awful disease. And I had slammed the door on God a long, long time ago. And so, on March the 4th of 1972, sitting at the kitchen table in that same old god-awful bathrobe. I don't think I ever changed. I remember once going over town to Brecksville in that bathrobe with no shoes on and buying a bottle of wine and getting in the car and somehow getting home. I bought celery, too. You know how it is, you were always having a luncheon? Even when you can't cook or clean, you can't even go to the bathroom where you should. You're always going to have a luncheon so you can buy the wine. I remember getting out of the car and shuffling like an old woman across the garage with holding that bottle to me like you'd hold a baby. And the celery had made the bottom of the bag wet. And the bottle fell out. And it smashed all over the garage floor. And I stood there and I watched my life going down that sewer in the center of the garage. And on that March the 4th, sitting there with the incapability of making a bed, of boiling an egg, of doing anything else, I watched my family go to church. It was the first time I had finished everything that I could get my hands on in that house. The rubbing alcohol, the cologne, all those goodies you go to when you run out of something. And I didn't have that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach that I was out of alcohol. I felt nothing. It's the first time that I hadn't gotten up and stood in front of the doors and screamed blasphemies when my husband took those children to church, to Sunday school. I just watched them go. And everything that I had done and everything that I had become was written all over those faces. And when they left, I knew I was dying. It wasn't because I weighed 62 pounds. It wasn't because my hair was falling out. It wasn't because I had little sores like impetigo all over that kept running. I just knew I was dying. And I like to believe, and I do believe, that this is the first spiritual experience that I had, because I believe alcoholism is a sickness of the soul. And that little part of me that was left that still belonged to God opened up, and he zoomed in. And when I hear the How It Works read, and when I hear we couldn't help ourselves and no other human being could help us, and God did, I didn't even call on him. And it was almost like he zoomed in and said, "Come on, my child, you've had enough." And I never want to forget that. I crawled to the phone, I yanked it down off the wall, and I dialed my Aunt Jean in Chicago, who had 11 years at that time in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I told her that I wanted to live, and that I was willing to go to any lengths to do anything. And she asked me the name of an old-timer who had never given up hope on me, and his name was Jerry Jackson. And Jerry died in 1978 with 30-some years of sobriety under his belt. I had met Jerry when I was going around Alcoholics Anonymous in 1962. Jerry had come over to the house and taken an immediate like to Bruce and the children. And he literally kept coming over there, and he glued that family together. He gave them that wonderful, wonderful hope. The hope that we hang on to when the chips are down. That same kind of hope, and I found that one day. I was cleaning the house, and I knocked the cobweb down out of the corner, and this little spider came down, boop, on an invisible thread, and it was swinging back and forth. You know, I put the mop back. I wanted to kill him. I've tried to like them. I really have, but there's something about them, you know, they're, ooh. Anyway, I couldn't do it. I thought, hey, wait a minute. He's hanging on to that invisible something that we hang on to, that our families hang on to, that our children hang on to, that wonderful hope that we can climb and rebuild what has been destroyed. And I watched that spider. Oh, I didn't stand there like a ding-dong and watch him for a couple of days, you know. I went about my biz. But every time I go through there, I'd watch him, and he climbed one furry foot over the other. Slowly trudged up that invisible something, and he rebuilt a web that was stronger, and it was more beautiful than before. And I like to think about that when I think about hope. Jerry came over and he said, you know, it isn't going to be easy. Nothing in life that's worthwhile is easy. But I promise you this. If you'll take our arms and hands and come along the road with us, it'll get better. It'll get better. And I believed. I believed what he was saying. And then the kamikazes hit. The sponsors. My God, if you're new, pick your own. These were just there. They came in the door and they looked and they said, God, you're sick. And then they would talk and and I heard one say, I don't think she's going to make it overnight. And the other, there weren't any kind of treatment centers. There was St. Thomas, but they had a 4.5-week waiting list to get in for detox. Rosary Hall, that had 4 beds for women, had shut the women's wing. They were painting the walls pink and hanging up polka-dotty curtains or something. And then there was Serenity Hall up there, and they weren't taking women at all. So my sponsors looked at me and they said, nobody's ever died on this yet, and nobody's going to start. So we started to go to meetings, and we went 2 and 3 times a day, 7 days a week for the first 9 months I was sober. And then when I had been sober 9 months, they walked into the kitchen and they had street maps of every county in Ohio. And they had little meeting lists of every county in Ohio. And they plunked them down on the counter and they said, stay home and suck your thumb and get drunk or get in the car and go. And it was in these meeting rooms that I learned and am learning how to live. It's just how to live. This adventure life. It's the greatest adventure I've ever been on. I love it. I remember them supporting me through the door of that first meeting. And you know what I felt first? A handshake. It was the first physical contact that I'd had in a long, long time. And you know what you said? Welcome. You didn't look at me and say, did you have fun out there? Did you learn anything? None of that smart stuff. You just said, welcome back. And if you stay here and follow a certain little simple ditties, it'll get better. And I believed you. I heard the words we, us, our. It isn't I, me, my mind. We are powerless over alcohol, our lives. I didn't feel alone. Somehow I just didn't feel alone. There's magic that goes on in here. Did you ever try to explain to somebody what an AA meeting's like? I did to a friend of mine. She said, oh, it sounds just like a PTA meeting. You know, you go in. You do. Well, figure it out. You walk in, you shake hands. You know, other people do that too. And eat donuts or cookies, and you have coffee and you blab, and then you sit down and you listen, and then you get up and you blab a little bit more, and then you have more donuts and more coffee, and you go home. But something's in here. Something's in here. And you and I know it's the grace of God. You and I know it's hope. We know it's faith. It just, and it's gratitude. The gratitude just hangs over the room. It's a wonderful feeling. Wonderful feeling. And then I heard that serenity prayer. And you know what? The first time I heard that thing, I tried to make my mouth move and make sounds come out so you guys would think I knew it. And you'd like me. And my sponsor, for the first time, one of many I might say, went into the rib cage. And she said, you don't have to pretend anymore. If you stay in these meeting rooms and you do the simple little ditties you're asked to do, the day will come when you can say that prayer. And I remember when the day came, I remember saying it. I know who I was around, and I know how I felt. I felt good. It was the first thing that I had ever set out to do in my whole life that I'd accomplished. And I remember the tears coming. And she said, good, if you can learn that, keep the cotton out of your ears, shove it in your mouth, and stay in these rooms, and you'll learn more. She said, this is an adventure of life. Of life. You know how you have kind of those things that come into the mind in the beginning about, ooh, well, maybe someday. And the people in my home group know what I'm thinking before it pops out of my mouth. And somebody said, let me tell you a story. And maybe this is going to clear up that thought once and for all. Yes, they said you say you surrendered, but every so once in a while, this is a sneaky, cunning little thing, and boop, it might pop back in there. We're going to quit it once and for all. It's like you were a cucumber, Beth, growing in a garden. And I mean, you're an okay cucumber. Not much excitement going on in your life. You sort of lay there and grow away. And then one day you're picked. And you're put into a deep barrel. And they put the lid on, and it's dark in there. And there is no day, and there is no night, and there is no time, and you're sloshing around in this liquid. And then at some particular time, they reach in that barrel, and they take you out, and you're a pickle. There is no way you can ever be a cucumber again. So you have to learn to live like a pickle. Now, go to the grocery store, buy yourself a jar of pickles, and keep them in your refrigerator as a constant reminder. I still have the pickles in there today. My God, not the same ones. Different ones. And I'll open that refrigerator sometime, hey, what step are you guys on in there, Takes all kinds, doesn't it? If you're new, stay in these rooms and you may clear up like this too. But that makes sense. I've never seen a pickle go back to being a cucumber. And that ended that. And they said, you got to stay away from the first drink one day at a time. I thought they were crazy. I never had one drink in my life. I don't know about you. Those are for social drinkers. I never was a social drinker. Closest I came to being one of those is when somebody said, I think I'll have another drink. And I said, so shall I. Yes. So I was invited out of the meeting across the field to sit on some railroad tracks. They said, I'll teach you patience and tolerance. And when the train comes along and runs over you, you get up off that track and you come on back up here and tell us how you feel. Well, I was pretty fuzzy, but I wasn't that fogged up. I'll clear you. I said, I'll never make it back here. I said, it'll kill me. In fact, I'll be dead when the engine kills me. And the whole room went, hooray! She's learned. It's the engine that kills you, not the caboose. It's the drink that pulls it up here, over which you have no control. And after the meeting's over, don't ask me what happens if the engine is going, or the train's going in reverse. I don't complicate it up. I don't pull it apart. I was told to keep it simple. And since I was born, when Lincoln was president, the engine has always pulled the choo-choo. But I get it, and I understand it. It's the engine that'll kill me. It's the first negative thought as well as the first drink. And I got to stay away from that kind of stuff. But I can't do it one day at a time. I have never been able to live this program one day at a time. I got to do it now. This is what's important. Right now. This is how it is. Right now I can accept anything. This minute. God bless you. Me too. Peggy has zits. I have a cold sore, and they put me together upside down. My nose is running and my feet smell. Anyway, took you a while to get this one. Ha ha. That's the only joke I know, so there it is. It's got to be now. And I got to live my life in the nows of each day. I've seen the most beautiful things right now. I have seen 4 of my grandchildren born. in the nows. I saw a double rainbow. My life changed in a split second. I love the nows. This is living. This is life. I don't want to miss anything. And then you told me certain things to do. You never told me to just blithely do anything that you'd never done. You never used me as an experiment. All you did was pass on to me what had worked for you. You told me to get 25 phone numbers and to put them up on the wall by the phone. And I said, well, I have this little phone book. And somebody said, what good is that going to do when the mind starts going around and the horrible compulsion is knotting you up on the inside? You think you're going to be able to remember what you did with your darn phone book? If you put it up there by the telephone, there it is. And the reason for 25 is if you get in a tiz and you pick up the phone and you dial the first number and the line is busy, you won't get resentful that the person on the other end had the audacity to be talking to somebody else when you're in trouble and trying to call. And so you move to the second number. If that nobody's there, then you won't get all resentful and full of self-pity because they had the audacity to go out because you were calling them on the telephone. If you keep going down that list, somebody's going to be home and you can share with somebody and it might just save your life. I still have 25 phone numbers by my phone today. Yeah, they've changed. People have died. People have left our area. I have them glued under the phone upstairs. I have them by the phone at work. I still do that today. That helps me because they're there. And this is straightening out. But I'll tell you, when the feelings get going down here, I don't know how you are, but I know me well enough to know that I need those phone numbers there, and I cannot take time to look for a book of numbers. You told me to get outside of myself, that I've been selfish and self-centered for too long. To send somebody a card or to pick up a phone and call up somebody and just say, how are you? To when I walked down the street and I saw somebody coming towards me, smile at them. Especially somebody who's walking on their face. Did you ever see somebody walking on their face? Go on. And smile at them. See what happens. Watch them. No, they're not going to slug you in the back of the head. I have never done that, but what shoulders go back, I have heard people start to whistle. It might be the only gift that they have received. And they said to take a lot of baths. It's good to relax in the bathtub. I was told to read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was told that every question that I had could be answered in there if I looked hard enough. And I was told to read 2 pages a day out loud, starting on the flap. And you know, I still do that today. I read 2 pages a day out loud. That way it goes in here, to here, down to here. Just like it did in the beginning. I've gone through 4 big books. I write on the margin, I underline. It's magic, it changes. It's the most beautiful love story that I've ever read in my life. You want to know something? None of us should be in this room. If you want a soul grabber, take a look around here. Nobody should be here. We should be dead. We should be insane. The people who are in Al-Anon should be in loony bins. The Alateens should be in loony bins or out on the street. My God, look what God has done for us. I was told this is a gift, and I might not get it again. And like any gift, you have to take care of it. And I feel that what I do each day is my gift back to God. You know, it's kind of like a Monopoly set. You get it for Christmas, and it's great, and you play with it, and you've got all those little houses and hotels and all those funny little things that go around the board, and the chances and the community chest, and the dice and all that, and you take real good care of it, and you put it away, and you put it on the shelf, and you go take it down, you can play with it again. If you get careless and you lose a house here, a community chest there, or something over there, the day is going to come when you can't play with that gift anymore. I want to get careless with this. That big book is special. It's got everything in it. I was told in AA that there are musts in this program. And my sponsor said to me, find them in the big book and count them. And I found them and I counted them. If you think I'm going to tell you, you're nuts. You guys, if it starts to rain like crazy again here, and you have to stay in the house, like up on the dresser so the waters don't rise, at least that's what we've had up there, find them. Took me 2.5 years to come up with the right answer. But I found them and there are musts. Told me to read the 24-hour book 4 times a day out loud to get it in here, to here, down here. The thought for the day, the prayer for the day, 4 times a day out loud. I still do that today. I'm a quick forgetter, and that's become habit with me, and I do it. I was also told to read Winnie the Pooh. And Peggy talked this morning about the whiners. My sponsor said to me, I would rather have you be like Tigger in that book than Eeyore. Now, if you don't know who Eeyore is, it's a donkey that stands out in the field and nothing is ever right. He thinks he's lost his tail. He blames it on everybody else. He's always got the poor me's. It's like there's a cloud over his head. And I had to read that darn thing every day for a year. I also had to read The Little Engine That Could. And I'll tell you something, those were the only 4 things that I could read. For the first 3 years, I was sober. God, I'd see the pamphlets over there, and God, they're pretty. They just don't make them plain icky brown or so black or something like that. They make them pink and aqua and yellow, and gee, they look good. And I went once to get one. And my sponsor slapped my hand, and she said, we'll let you know when you're ready. On my 3rd anniversary or birthday, as you call them down here, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they gave me a box like that with every single pamphlet that had been printed. And they gave me the Sermon on the Mount, and they gave me the 12 and 12, and they said, go to it. And then they told me I had no options. And I don't. Drinking is not an option with me anymore. The big book is an option, the 24-hour book is an option, the 12 and 12 is an option, even Winnie the Pooh is an option, but not anything else. And in these meeting rooms, I was told to get active. I was told if I sit in the corner, sucking my thumb, sobriety is not going to come over and sit on my lap and say, you dear sweet little thing. In fact, my sponsors took me to a duck pond. And they said, what do you see? And I said, ducks. I got an 8 for that one. And I said, they're gliding along. They don't even make a ripple in the water. And my sponsor said to me, okay, now, hold your nose, put your face down underneath the water, open it up, come on up and tell us what you see. And I did it because I wanted to stay sober more and I wanted to be drunk. And I came up and they said, well, what'd you see? And I said, their little legs are going around like that. She said, that's right. If you want that serenity and that peace that they've got, then your little legs are going to have to go around like that. You're going to have to get active. And it all starts with ashtrays. And shook for almost a year. And I'd pick up these ashtrays, and I'd go over to the wastebasket. And I'll tell you, the wastebasket was about as far away from me as Peggy. And I'd be going, the bucks would be going like this, and the ashes. And you know what she said to me? Stay in these meeting rooms and it'll get better. Oh, God. And I did. And today, I can pick up one. I'm right-handed. I can pick up one with my left-handed. God, I could walk from Fort Worth, Texas to Brecksville, Ohio, and I wouldn't spill anything unless there was a big wind. You know? It does get better. I did chairs, kitchen duty, all those things that we hear about. And then, God, I believed in you. Oh, I like the windows of your soul, your eyes. I'm still trying to get mine as white as yours are. I said to Peggy the other night, God, aren't these women in Texas beautiful? You know, and good old Peggy always wants you to accept the things you cannot change. After all, she's been sober many more 24 hours. I said, they're so beautiful, these women in Texas. You know, and look at us. Not saying we're not nice, but I mean, my God, the blondes with the blue eyes and stuff. She said to me, we were built for the plow in the Midwest. I'm going to go home and get out the damn lawnmower. I don't know, it's fun. Anyway, it's all here. It's right in these meeting rooms. And I liked what you had, you know, and then you said to me, hey, at night, take your bedroom slippers off and get down on your knees and push your slippers under your bed. And while you're down there, say thank you. And I said, to who and for what? And you said, you'll find out who you're talking to. Don't push the river. It runs just great by itself. You know, and easy does it, but do it. And then in the morning, when you wake up, after you've laid there and listened to the sounds of the day. Did you ever do that? I used to wake up, as I told you, full of fear. Today I wake up and I know what I did yesterday, and I know how I felt yesterday, and oh, jeeps, it's a new day. And I lie there and I can hear the wind blowing through the trees. I can hear rain on the roof. I can hear the beginnings of God's day. I can hear birdies start to sing. I can hear the other people in the home that I live in breathing. Listen to the sounds of the beat of life. If you live by yourself and you hear somebody else breathing, I'll tell you, you better dial 911. Anyway, and then they said, get down on your knees and grovel around for your bedroom slippers, and while you're doing that, remind yourself that you're an alcoholic, the problem is you, and ask to make lemonade out of the lemons of life that are bounced your way today, and get up and get on with this thing called life. And I did it, and I found out who I was talking to, and his name's God. Oh, I love God as I understand him. You know, he is so peachy. He laughs, my God. He's also slow. Dial heaven, the line is always open. Yeah, you dial heaven, he puts you on hold while you run around and do the footwork. I have never put a question mark where God has put a period. Never run around saying, why me? First place, you don't get an answer. Second place, why not me? Obviously, with his grace and the power of this program and the step, this way of life, we are never given any more in a 24-hour period or right now than we can handle. And God's carried me through all the dark places in my sobriety, and there's been a lot. A lot. It's a spiritual program. I You know what you did? You waited until I came to believe in a power greater than myself that I choose to call God, who I know has forgiven me enough to hand me this beautiful gift of life. And then I learned how to forgive myself. Not only was there Kimberly, but I had a little boy 3.5 years before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, who lived 8 days and he died. He died of what they call today the fetal syndrome disease. That little boy died because he was an addict. They fed Jeffrey with an eyedropper of whiskey every hour to try to make him stop shaking, and they couldn't do it. And he died. And I remember my husband had to come and get me on the day that Jeffrey was born, because somebody in the hospital had put a sign that said "Murderous" on my door. And God, that was heavy stuff. But I knew my God, as I understand him, has handed me a gift of life. He has forgiven me. If I don't forgive myself, I feel I'm putting myself on a plane higher than God. And all those awful, horrible things that happened were because of alcohol. Or because of alcohol. The task in front of you is never as great as the power behind you. And I wrote a real searching and fearless fourth step, moral inventory. I gave it to somebody I could trust. I've taken 5th, 4th, and 5th steps since I've come into the program. And I made my amends. I only had trouble in one place. They said that when to do so would injure them or others. Now, I have come to the conclusion that others is us. Because I walked down the street and I apologized to this lady for vomiting all over white carpeting, for throwing a chair through a sliding glass door, for taking a sledgehammer and beating it against her fireplace. And I told her I had joined AA, and she said to me, "I don't care if you've joined the Foreign Legion. Once a drunk, always a drunk." She slammed the door, my nose was in the way, and it got fractured. And I ran home and I cried, and I called my sponsor, and I said, "You know what?" And my sponsor said, "Now you know what amends are. You're making amends for you. You did, Beth, what you were supposed to do, and how she took it is up to her." I asked God to remove all the violent character defects and the other ones. I love the 10th step. I adore it. I think the steps are ongoing. You're never through. You're never there. I thought I would get there someday. I always said to my sponsor, "Someday I'll be there." She said, "Where?" I said, "There." She said, "You know what? It's like going on a train into the station. God, you're focusing on the station. You're missing the scenery. You're never going to get there." I said, "The day I die, I'll get there." She said, "The day you die, young lady, you'll go to the big meeting in the sky, and when you walk through those gates, you go through as a new person, and you start all over again." And I keep a conscious contact. I talk to God all the time. Now that I can hoover without bottles and stuff, and now that I can do all those simple little things, cook, clean, do all that, and carry on like a sort of a normal human being, whatever that is. But anyway, and love each day, love each now. And I didn't practice the principles in all my affairs. I didn't. I was a wonderful wife and mother. I was going to all these meetings. I wasn't drinking. They better watch out what they did or they said, or I might get drunk. And my home group heard about it. I don't know if you have a home group. It's like big brother and big sister watching you. They know what you're doing and saying, and they're not even around. And they heard about it. You know how they are in a home group. You know, you're driving to work on a Monday morning and you're late. And somebody's in front of you having a spiritual experience looking at the abutment. They're going 20 miles an hour. And you can't get around them, and you want to take your car, and you know what you want to do with it. And you know who drives up beside you? Toot, toot, woo-hoo, a member of your home group. Oh, yes. God grant me the serenity. Go supermarket on a Saturday. Every man in the United States of America is in my supermarket up there. And men love supermarkets. They walk with a basket like this, elbows out. So you cannot get around the left, you can't, and they are gazing with such ecstasy at the tuna or the olives. And you say, excuse me, and they don't hear you. You say, excuse me, and by this time they're looking at the artichoke hearts. And they don't hear you. And you want to take your basket, and you know what you want to do with it? And then you know who goes, woo-hoo, out of the ketchup bottle? A member of your home group. God, they come out of the sewers, they're hanging from everywhere. And you, oh yes, God grant me the serenity, so you back up your basket and you just get on with it. Have a home group, and they heard and they told me to go home and treat my family the way I treated members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did. I shook their hands. Hi, I'm Beth, I'm Mother. I had this big and 4 littles. God, those kids. Annie is now 32. I remember Annie when she'd stand there and say, don't drink, Mama. You get so ugly. And I promise her. Annie and I are very good friends today. She and her husband live in Mogador, which is a community about half an hour away from us. And they have 2 children. Billy is 7. Billy plays hockey. If you really want to know what's fun in life, go watch these little 7-year-olds play hockey. God, they're tripping over their shirts. It's wonderful. And I can stand up there in the stands and say, "Kill up," and Billy waves, you know, and then somebody hits into him. Shannon was born in December, and she's darling. I remember when Annie got married and she stopped by the pew and she said, "Thank God for A, Mom." And thank God we can say thank God. Linda, my 29-year-old, is going through a very, very bad divorce. She needs prayers. When Lynn was 18, she ran away with somebody. She's divorcing. She said to me, it isn't because of any of the alcoholism that was going on, Mom. It's because of something that's going on that I can't stand to watch. And we told her that we loved her. We didn't like what she was doing, but the door would always be open, and thank God we told her that. Because she kept coming back. And today, Lenny and I see a lot of each other. And I'm trying to do the best that I can do to help her through this with the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. She has 2 children. Candace is almost 9. Sometimes I ask Candace stuff and don't ask God, because Candace knows just about as much. and Adam is 7. I love those grandchildren of mine. We have fun, and fun is what this simple program is all about. Listen to it. Listen to the laughter. Look at the joy on people's faces. This isn't something where we get into sackcloth and ashes and we go marching along. This is a way of life that is full of excitement, adventure, and fun. God, I never thought the day would come when I could sit with 4 little children. And we even take Shannon along. She doesn't blow funny through the straw, but the rest of us do. And they look at us like we're crazy. We have sodas and everything comes up in your face and we laugh because it's fuzzy and it goes up your nose. We rake leaves and we jump in the pile. This is living, this is life. It's wonderful. My son Bruce is 27 years old. He is a paramedic. He is one of the best friends I have ever had in my life. And he did not speak to me for the first 3 years I was sober. I had hurt him very badly physically. One day when he tried to dump out a bottle of my wine when he was almost 8 years old. Do you know what it's like being sober and going to meetings and walking into a house and having somebody walk out another door? You know what it's like sitting down at a table sober and somebody says, I don't want to sit with her? And you know what you said to me? Don't hold him in your hand and crush him. Keep your hand open. And like a butterfly, if he flies away and never comes back, it'll mean you weren't supposed to have him in the first place. But if he comes back, then it means you were supposed to have him. Accept the things you cannot change. Let go. God, I didn't know how to let go and let God. Until my sponsor said to me, did anybody ever fix anything for you in your life? And I said, yes, my old Scotch grandfather. And she said, you remember. Give me a time when he did. And I remembered when the dog chewed up my raggedy, chewed both her arms off. And I took those arms, and I took that doll, and I went to this wonderful Scotchman. And I climbed on his lap, and with the tears streaming down my face, I said, Grandpa, fix it. And he looked at me and he said, Bethy, I can't fix it till you let go. And I have used that more, and like a child, you know, I didn't care if Grandpa sewed one arm on her head and one coming out of her belly button. I trusted him. I had that blind faith of a child. And I had to let go of Brucey. And you said, keep going to his ball games. Keep doing this. Do the things you're supposed to do. And I did. And on one hot July day, when he was pitching a Little League game, championship, he turned around and his eyes searched the stands and they caught mine, and he saluted me with a ball. And after the game was over, he said, you know, Mom, it doesn't make any difference if we win or we lose as long as you're here. And I could talk to him. He loves AA. And John, the baby, with an 18-and-a-half-inch neck, he was the biggest rat fink I've ever known. Don't tell Daddy I have a bottle. You know, and the first thing he'd do, she got some, you know, and then Herbert Hoover and the FBI would go to work in the house, you know, through the drawers. They never found a lot of the places. One day they didn't have school, and my sponsor said, you better stay home or be home in the afternoon. Went to a morning meeting, and I got home, and he came through the back door, and he said, I want lunch. I was terrified. I was sober about 3 months. I hadn't started to cook yet. I didn't know how. I shook. You held my coffee cups still, and I didn't know how to make lunch. And I called my sponsor, and I was crying. And this little baseball cap and these big eyes peeked up over the thing. the little counter. He said, I'll help you make lunch. And my sponsor heard him. And she said, you have come as a child. Take the hand of a child. Let a child lead you, Beth. You have got to crawl before you can walk. And so he took out the bread, and he took out the peanut butter, and he took out the jelly, and he put the bread like this, and he spread this one. He says, Daddy says you have to be careful, you make holes. And then the jelly falls through. He put jelly on this one, he put them together, and he cut them in half, and he said, this is a sandwich. Now you make one. And with tears of gratitude pouring down my face, my 7-year-old son watched me make my first sober sandwich. That wonderful man that hung in there died of leukemia in 1978 after a 2.5-year illness. I will never be able to express my gratitude for the courage you gave me, for being there, for helping me through this, as my God did also. He literally carried me through that dark valley. I was with Bruce, as were the children, the night that he died. And he looked at me and he said, I love you, and I thank God for AA. And I'll see him someday. I never felt so lost. And I said to the kids, I gotta go outside for a minute. And I went outside and I sat there, and it was one of the most beautiful nights. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. You could see all the stars. And I said, I don't want this, God. I don't want it. And it was almost like something just patted me on the top of the head and said, just get on with this thing called living, and it'll get better. And it has. Yeah, I miss him. But you know what? I remember the good times. I remember the picnics. I remember the fun we had because of the grace of God and you guys, that we were able to rebuild what had been destroyed. And I am grateful that I had as much time with him as I did. This is a wonderful way of life. You can't beat it. So stay in these meeting rooms and live and love and laugh and enjoy. This is the most beautiful gift in the world. I want to read you a letter that my kids wrote me for my 17th birthday. And now shut up. There it goes. See, that's my arthritis pill. Now, see, I do take pills. That is my arthritis pill, and I am late in taking it. It's wonderful when you get to be 25 to get arthritis. I had a wonderful experience on my real birthday last weekend. I worked at Dr. Bob's house in Akron for all day on Saturday. God, what a blessing. It says, it's nice to know you're always there. And you are, Mother. We kids don't really know how to tell you thank you for 17 years of happiness and learning. We guess the best way would be to copy the verse that Daddy wrote in the Bible that he gave you on your first AA anniversary. Remember, you read it to Daddy and us a few days before he died. That's when Daddy again told us to thank God for your life in AA, for continuing to teach you how to live and to love and to care and to just be. We've changed the word I to we and the other first person so that all your children and your grandchildren could be included. We love you, Mom, not only for what you are, but for what we are when we are with you. We love you not only for what you have made of yourself, but for what you are making of us. We love you for ignoring the possibilities of a fool in us and for laying a firm hold in the good in us. We love you for closing your eyes to the discords in us and for adding to the music in us by listening. We love you because you are helping us to make of the lumber of our lives not a tavern, but a temple, and of the words of our everyday not a reproach, but a song. You have done it by learning to be just yourself. Perhaps, after all, that is what AA is all about. We love you, Mom. You are a precious moment in our lives. Thank God for you and for AA. Keep trudging your road in your nows. And it's signed Annie, Linda, Bruce, and John. And this is because of you. This is nothing I have done by myself. Thank you so much for what you have given to me. And now may the road rise to meet you and the wind be always at your back and the sun shine warm upon your face and the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand, in the nows of each day. Have a wonderful weekend. I love you. God bless you.